The fact that we could launch a person off the planet and into space, well, that is something special. As far as we can tell, we are the only species in the galaxy that can do it. And by all rights, we probably have no business being up there at all. We've launched men and women into space over and over again. We've had our share of bad luck, but as far as achievement as a species, yeah, I think we've done all right. In 1955, we had ourselves a space race. It was an event that would change the world forever. It was between two superpowers, the USSR and the United States of America. The Soviets got the jump when they strapped a man called Yuri Gagarin to a missile they called Sputnik and fired him off into space. That went pretty well, and old Yuri became pretty famous.
But the world was stunned. Americans were dumbfounded. The Soviets, it was perceived, had taken the lead in a race for which we were not yet fully prepared. But we caught up very quickly.
Back home, the folks were pretty interested in making sure the Russians didn't get too far ahead. We weren't the best of friends at that time, and the little trip into space made sure we got a hustle on. President Kennedy gave a speech of a lifetime in Texas, and it sure got the people fired up.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Both governments had gone and got a bee in their britches about each other's space program, and getting on to the moon became priority number one.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
President Kennedy had lit the match. The people were ready, and NASA brought in some of the finest minds in America to get the job done.
I came with NASA back during the Apollo program and worked on the Apollo program and all the manned programs up right through to the International Space Station. The Apollo program hadn't really started flying humans yet, so I came before the first flight of Apollo and then get ready to fly because we were trying to get to the moon by the end of the decade. It was a real technological challenge and we wanted to make it happen.
NASA sprang into action and the American space industry was off to the races.
I think we felt it could be done, and we were all working very hard at that point to make it happen. People working 7 days a week and working right through the day, right through the evening. So it was a very intense period.
All of a sudden, science and technology were right there in the public eye. Celestial mechanics met rocketry. Research met industry, and theory met practicality.
And I've been lucky to have been working nearly 50 years in the subject and to have participated in the debate, which has got us from a stage where we didn't know whether there was a Big Bang or not. We knew nothing about black holes or whether Einstein's theory of general relativity was correct, to a stage when we know that our universe is far more complicated than we thought before, and we can understand with fair detail everything back to when the universe had been expanding for a microsecond.
We made some real leaps in that time, perhaps more than at any time in history. We were all working on different legs of the same dog.
There was evidence in astronomy from the use of new optical and radio telescopes that there were more objects in the sky than just stars and galaxies. There were huge black holes, and also we had evidence for the Big Bang. This brought new areas of the subject into play.
A guy by the name of Neil Armstrong and his lunar module pilot Buzz Aldrin made it onto the moon. It was a pretty big deal and the whole world was watching.
I'm going to step off the limb.
The entire generation was mesmerized.
That's one small step for man.
Space, science, and technology had succeeded.
One giant leap for mankind.
We walked on the moon. The date was the 21st of July, 1969. I'd like to think that President Kennedy would have been pretty happy.
Armstrong is on the moon. Neil Armstrong.
And with that, the race was over.
But I think the important point is that when the Apollo program was achieved, the momentum was lost. If the momentum of the Apollo program had been maintained, then there would have been people on Mars by the 1980s or 1990s. But there was no political motive to continue after the Apollo program, and therefore expenditure by NASA and the Americans was scaled back.
It's been a little quiet around here lately, but there's been a new sheriff in town, and he kind of knows a thing or two about the importance of space travel.
Because broadening our capabilities in space will continue to serve our society in ways that we can scarcely imagine. Because exploration will once more inspire wonder in a new generation, sparking passions and launching careers. That means tackling major scientific and technological challenges. Science that will garner tangible benefits, helping us to protect our environment for future generations.
With a science-minded leader at the helm, science became a priority, and the memories of the benefits of previous generations of space exploration started to trickle back.
Well, I think there was great interest in science. The scientific the community was very interested in Apollo 11 and having the astronauts get samples from the moon and return them to Earth. We are not only still getting results from the samples that were selected on the moon. Samples are still analyzed by scientists all over the world, but we've also added to that the results of the exploration beyond the moon now to the planets. So there was a great interest in science, and that interest goes on today.
We've got a few problems here on Earth at the moment. It probably doesn't help that we aren't treating our ecosystem with the respect it needs to support us. It's pretty clear that the next 100 years is going to be crucial in our survival. We've come a long way for sure, but it isn't long until we bump into some real problems that we just might not have solutions to.
It's a dangerous delusion to ever think there'll be mass emigration to Mars. And we've got to solve the world's problems here on Earth. We can't escape by mass emigration. We've got no planet B, as it were. We could wipe ourselves out if we are very misguided. On the other hand, we can trigger the transition to a post-human era.
Space has become an essential part of our lives. Not only has it helped life here on Earth and made it much better with the expeditions we've gone to the moon and gone to the planets, we're learning more about how the Earth was really evolved, and we're learning more about how critical our environment is. And space is giving us the capability to monitor that environment and really understand it better, and hopefully understand how we can alleviate the adverse effects of what we've been doing here on Earth to make sure we don't degrade that environment.
We've had a pretty good run on this planet. We've accomplished things we had no business accomplishing, and maybe the world needs a bit of a break from us anyway. The future will soon be in the hands of the next generation. Little kids running around full of good ideas, happy, inspired, and not afraid of a little hard work.
Well, I think we're all on this planet together. We need to make sure that we have an environment where we can continue to live and prosper, and do that for future generations, because it's really what's going to happen in the future that's important, and the young people who come beyond us, making sure that they've got a world they can live in, and it's a peaceful and a productive world, and one where they can raise their children and have a future well beyond where they're going to be doing.
And it's important to bear in mind that scientific discovery is a collective effort. Obviously, big instruments are collective, but even theoretical work of the kind I do involves people tossing ideas off each other and collaborative ideas. I think it would be far harder for people to work in isolation.
We learned a thing or two during that race, and it's probably a pretty good idea that we pass on those lessons while we can. It's time to get back to work again, because the world right now is running on a knife's edge. If we could just get things moving along like they used to in the old days, well, I'm sure we'd be all right.